Welcome to the 5 Yard IDP pod with me, Nath Davis. Today we will be reviewing week 5 and getting you ready for week 6. Evening, Brent. How's it going, buddy? You all right?
Not too bad. Evening rushers. How are we all doing?
Better than me. Probably better than me.
Had a rough time of it down in London, people. He's just about recovering. Just about.
What a weekend it was. It was, absolute cracking. Can't knock it, but yeah, the fans were great. The stadium was great. Everything was good. But today I spent most of the time running to the toilet. I got dodgy kebab after the hippodrome. I think. Yeah, it's only my own fault. But there we go. How about
So,
so?
well, we
How
won't
did
be
you
eating
find
there
it?
this weekend then.
Oh God, probably
Nathan,
will.
Nathan's gone out and done a recce. He's found all the dodgy food.
Probably will be. That's the problem. That's the sad part about it. But yeah. So how did you find it, mate? Did it look all right on the telly? I haven't even
Yeah,
watched the game back.
yeah. Well, to be honest, I just about stayed awake through it because I like an idiot, and I stayed up to watch the Fury fight till the wee small hours. So yeah, sort of powered through and had about an hour's kip, and then watched the Jets Falcons game. But yeah, looked good. Stadium looked good. Yeah, it was. I know Andy, our mate, big Falcons fan. I'm sure he's come away from it happy. I thought the Jets were disappointing. I mean, a lot of fans there. I think they were talking about it on the ATN pod this morning, and the guys Dan Hansis and the big Jets fan, they were all there, and he reckoned they were outnumbering the Falcons fans something like 3-4-1.
Yeah,
Even though
it
it was
was.
supposed to be a home game for the Falcons, which it's never
Yeah,
quite works out that way. But yeah, it's a good
yeah.
win for the Falcons. Yeah,
It did
uh,
feel like that fans wise. I think there's definitely more Jets fans there than the Falcons side of things. But I think it's just it was definitely dominated by the randoms. There was different shirts everywhere. Definitely that took the majority of the stadium up. Then you had the little pockets, but yeah, no, it was good. It was a good day. Good day. Paying for it now, though, mate. Paying for it now. Right.
yeah, got to do it all again this week.
Absolutely. Before we go much further, right? As you all know, Manscaped are our sponsors, and they are the market leader in men's below the waist grooming. They've just released the Lawnmower 4.0, which is an absolute fantastic bit of kit. One of the best things about it is the skin safe technology. So you get no nicks on your bits, and you can receive 20% off with the code 5yard at manscaped.com. It really is a game changer, and you are missing out if you do not have one. So, like I said, it's 20% off um, at manscaped.com with the code 5yard. 5yard. Right. So, on to this week's games, Bren. I mean, you're kicking it off, aren't you? Thursday night, big one. Bucks at
Yeah,
Eagles.
yeah, good game in prospect this. So yeah, Bucks coming off a week 5 win against my Dolphins. I think 45-17 was a little bit flattering for Tampa in the end, but hey, they're 4-1. They're top of the NFC South. So yeah, so it's a little bit hard to gauge the Bucks defense based on the week 5 performance against the Dolphins. The Dolphins offense worked hard. They were in the game up until, they fought up until a pretty much a fourth quarter blowout by Brady and co. But ultimately, I don't really think Miami had the offensive weapons on the field to really test the Bucks defense. And it is, as we touched on before, a Bucks defense that's been a little bit short, a little bit banged up. So hey, a win's a win. Standout performance, well, a couple of them. One of my favourite players, Shaq Barrett. He's having another consistent season, sort of picking up where he left off. Towards the end of last season, racking up 17 points, 1.5 sacks, and forced fumble. Even then, to be fair, he's been slightly below his projected numbers, but he's still putting in, consistent fantasy numbers for me, even if he is a little bit below those projected figures. So, as a whole, I think this Bucks defense has been decent this season. I think Shaq Barrett is somewhat indicative of it. I don't think they've quite hit sort of the defensive stride that they were in towards the end of the regular season, going into postseason last year. But they've been, they've been decent. Not quite there yet. But on the waiver watch, and outside of Shaq Barrett, probably the standout performer, their 24-year-old corner. Again, they've been short in the secondary. So this week, Jamel Dean, stepped up, racked up 19.5 points, including a pick. Generally showed very good coverage. Jalen Waddle struggled to get open, most of the game from what I saw. Just good coverage all round. Did the basics right. Couple of good pass defended as well. Moving on to the Eagles, surprise win against the Panthers. I think we both, thinking back, fancied the Panthers. Good win for them, 21-18 at Carolina. The defense really stepped up in the second half of that game. They put a lot of good pressure on Darnold. They were helped. Sam Darnold missed some makeable throws. They had him for 3 picks as well in the second half of that game. So it was a bit of a game of two halves. Darius Slay racked up 26.5 points, including a couple of those picks. I'm still seeing him on the waivers, but I would bear in mind that Crawley had a bit of a day of it at the weekend. That's the first time this season in 5 weeks he's actually gone over 10.5 points. He has been close to single figures, so I wouldn't read too much into that just yet. Alex Singleton, another player I like at linebacker. He's, again, a bit like Shaq Barrett, been fairly consistent, another 17.5 points. Josh Sweat actually had one of his better games. He's been a little bit below par this season in the DL, 14.5 points. Jevon Hargrave, who's someone we seem to have mentioned a couple of times already this season, had one of his quieter games, still racked up, picked up a sack and 14.5 points. In terms of where to go from a fantasy perspective this week, I'd probably be sticking with your regular tried and tested Tampa players. Although Philly had it was a good road win, but they showed again in that first half that offense is prone to not so much mistakes, but again, they blew another touchdown with a crucial penalty, which, they've done that a couple of weeks on the bounce now. I think Tampa will try and step up and put a bit of pressure on Hurts. Regarding Philly players, I think Hargrave and Singleton are worth a shout in most matches. Their fantasy numbers back that up. They are pretty, they're being fairly consistent this season. Further back in the secondary, Philly, I can't see Slay having a repeat week 6. Not against this, after what Brady and Brown and Evans did, in that fourth quarter against the Dolphins, they just shredded them, in the final sort of 15 minutes. So I'm sort of leaning towards, I'm not sticking my neck on the block with any players outside of sort of your tried and tested players with this one. I'm not sure. I'd lean towards the Bucks. I think coming off the back of that performance, they really did show in that fourth quarter that when they put it together, and they're not going up against some half-assed secondary. There are still some good players in that Miami sort of DB line, and they made it look very easy in that fourth quarter. So I'd probably go with Tampa.
Yeah, I got Tampa as well. I think it'd be a decent game though. Yeah, but the Bucks for me, still Eagles, still just the lack of consistency in what they do and the way they do it. And there's still the run game still.
It's still a bit of a mystery, like we said last week. I don't think they figured out what to do with Miles Sanders, and they've got to cut out these stupid penalties. They can't. Okay, yeah. They got away with it against Carolina, but they can't do that against the likes of Tampa.
No, they'll have a field day on it. So, yeah. Before I jump on to me reviewing anything, I just want to quickly go through. I got the plan for the IDP leagues. So the bigger plan, I think everybody knows, obviously the IDP Plus leagues kicked off this year. Currently we've got the IDP Plus Dynasty leagues, which will run year on year. But the plan is to tweak and develop the scoring as we go and use those as, the way the way we're going to work things out. We never said we're ever going to get it spot on from the start, and there's already a couple of things that I want to tweak and change just to try and get that. I think the scoring's really good so far. I think everybody seems to be really positive about where, you know, the big play points are put in players in relation to the offensive players, and that doesn't feel too out there. But we still will make tweaks as we go. The plan then is to, at the end of the season, we will release all of the information. We're going to probably get some feedback from everybody that's involved. That's what we're going to ask everybody to do. And we'll be releasing all the top scorers, all the information we possibly can. And then what the plan is for next season is to be running 5 to 10 redraft leagues, and there will be 10 plus best balls, all in IDP plus, and getting as many people on board as we possibly can. If there is anybody already that is interested in that side of things, just hit me up on Twitter at NATO NFL, and I'll get you sorted. Right, where are we going? Actually, Bren, do you want to go again?
Yeah.
And go for the big one. I say the big one. It's a big one because we're going, but
this is one we're gonna have to
bloody
go and watch live and watch the highlights again on the Monday. But yeah, so the Dolphins at the Jags at Tottenham. So we've just come off the back of talking about the Bucks. As I say, that I don't think the 45-17 scoreline is quite a fair reflection of the game. You know, as I've just mentioned, they were in the game, but Brady just hit the gas pedal in the fourth quarter. The secondary have got to be better this week against Jacksonville. Xavier Howard, for all the Bucks were good. Xavier Howard, Eric Rowe, Byron Jones all had opportunities to make plays and didn't. I had put down they were poor. I think that might be a bit harsh, but they've definitely got to step up. I mean, when you consider probably the pick of the secondary for Miami was Jevon Holland in his rookie season, and even he only racked up 9.5 points. Yeah. So that's pretty indicative of just where they were last Sunday. But the DBs have got to be in play this week, simply because they're going up against a Jags offense with Lawrence, who's improving week on week. I think we saw better things from him last Sunday. The receiver core just isn't giving him a lot to work with. It feels to me he's having to do an awful lot of this work on his own. You know, create just roll out, and he seems to be dropping quite deep, looking for extra space, time that he's not going to get against better defenses. In the linebacker position, Jerome Baker, he came in for a lot of criticism. I'm not sure why. Yes, he missed some tackles, and it was one thing I highlighted with Baker back in the summer. For all he's a very good, consistent player, I noticed him thinking, "Come on, you've got to make that." But he still racked up 21 points. It was the best fantasy performance of his season, actually, and he picked up another sack. I also think Flores, will be pushing the DLs to, as I've touched on, to put pressure on Lawrence, because he's been prone to dropping back. I think if they can force that a little bit, get him to take a few more steps back, put that added pressure on him, force some mistakes. So as well as the DBs, I still think, Wilkins, Ogba, Jalen Phillips, who had his best fantasy week against Tampa on Sunday, 15.5 points. I think they're all in play, simply because this is a must-win game for Miami, and I think Flores, is well aware of that. Moving on to the Jags, Week 5 loss against the Titans, 37-19. They've dropped to 0-5, despite 3 sacks on Tannehill. But let's face it, of late, 3 sacks against Ryan Tannehill is a good week in Tannehill's book. Week 6, I'm possibly looking at the Jags DL. Okay, the Miami pass protection isn't as poor as the Titans, but it's not stellar by any stretch. Who we're looking at? Clevon Chase and 23.5 points was the pick of the bunch for the Jags, picked up a sack. Josh Allen, again, seems to be someone you and I have mentioned, a fair few times in the first 5 weeks. Picked up another 17 points, including half a sack. The nice thing about those two, again, they're both LBs you can play at DL. Also, Smoot, Edge, racked up 18.5 points, including 1.5 sacks. I found both Smoot and Chasen on the waivers. If you are short with some buys coming up, you could probably do worse. Summing the game up as a whole, I've got to go with Miami simply because this, as I said before, this is a must-win game for them. I think the defense will be better because off the back of this, we've got a potentially winnable game against the Falcons before we've got the Bills again. I think they dropped to 1-5 and that's it. They're going to start asking some real questions. This is still a good defense. I do believe that. If we've got Tua back, then, but they've got to produce this weekend. They've had some problems, but they'll also have to stop Robinson on the ground game, who had a pretty good, despite the loss against Titans, he racked up, more yards than Derrick Henry actually for the Titans. And that, as we all know, that's an area Miami have struggled in. So I am gonna side with the Dolphins. I still think they've got a better defense. If Tua's back, I think they've potentially got more weapons. It will hinge on, Fuller and Devontae Parker's had a knock as well. So even if Tua comes back, will he have the weapons? But yeah, Miami win, hopefully. So
yeah, I'm going Miami as well. I'm going Miami just because I can't back the Jags at the moment. I don't really want to back you neither at the moment. I mean, the way I still, like you said, I don't think. I mean, the defense are decent, but they gotta get some consistent, either a consistent run game going or whatever. I just don't. I felt it was quite bitty from the Dolphins. I mean, was it 2 touchdowns Gaskin had, wasn't it? Through the air.
Nothing. Still nothing on the ground, and that's a worry.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, because that just cements the way that they're going to play. But then, difficult. They need to back. Okay, so I'm Vikings at Panthers. The Vikings again had an interestingly close game. That's what I've written. Interestingly close. It was shocking again from my point of view, really, against the Lions and in week 5, and we had our kicker Greg Joseph to thank for the win. It's bad. It's really not good. IDP scoring in week 5 for the Vikings were as follows. Everson Griffin, he scored 24 points, which included 2 sacks and a forced fumble. As we keep saying, he's a must pick up. And he's actually a play week on week at the moment. I don't particularly like this matchup for him. However, yeah, he's still there or thereabouts. And the thing is, you've got to remember the teams pay so much attention to Daniel Hunter, and it often means that Griffin has the chance for a sack. Then after Griffin's 24 points, then came Eric Kendricks. He scored 19.5 points. He dropped off a bit this week in tackle count, but his interception that certainly helped him out points wise. Daniel Hunter did score 17 points. He got a sack, and DJ Wanham also he got involved as well. He got a sack as well, coming off the bench and grabbing one. DBs, Harrison Smith tackled well at DB. He got 40 with the next high score of 14.5 points. So as you can see, Vikings putting some decent points even in that match this weekend. For the Panthers in week 5, it was an out of sorts performance, really. I think most people that were watching in the Hippodrome, we were quite shocked actually at exactly the performance by Darnold, and really quite how well I thought the secondary of the Eagles played. Um, the game started with Darnold getting picked off by Darius Slay, and that then the game swung back to the Panthers. If anybody saw it, I'm not sure how the Panthers missed that defensive touchdown in the second quarter that bobbled around the end zone. They did pick up a safety, but it's incredible play that was. For the Panthers, Dante Jackson then forced a fumble in the third quarter. That was picked up by Jeremy Chin, and I thought then the game might turn back towards the Panthers. But yeah, Jackson picks off Hurts again, and then it was like surely now they're gonna bring it home. And Darnold threw another pick to Darius Slay. Philly got back into the game and won it with the special teams turnover. And then it all finished off with Darnold being picked off again. So it all in all was a terrible day for the Panthers. And will they bounce back against the Vikings? Will that same thing happen again? I think they will bounce back, and I don't think the same will happen again. I don't quite know what went on. I don't know why Sam Darnold felt that he had to wear it out as much as he did really in that game. I felt that he took a few gambles that he didn't need to do, and I don't think he'll do it again. Just one thing, obviously, the Vikings may still be without Dalvin Cook, or they might be playing him slightly injured. And the Vikings don't look right at this moment in time with Cook being out. I think that's making a big difference, even though Mattison played quite well. But back to the Panthers, from a defensive viewpoint, in week 5, we had Hassan Reddick, 31 points, 2 sacks in that, 2 tackles for a loss. Reddick's putting up some top numbers, and do you know what? He's possibly on track to finish the same way, the same kind of scoring as he had last season when he was at the Cardinals, and he was up. I can't remember where he actually finished, but he was definitely in the top 5 or 6 when playing him at DL. So 31 points, a hell of a week for him. I mentioned Dante Jackson. He had a day. He scored 20 points. AJ Boy, he scored 13 points. He's somebody keep an eye on in the backfield. Because obviously they're light. They're missing quite a few big corners at the moment. And if he's back, I think he's going to be the main guy on the field. So he's been, he had disciplinary issues. It was a suspension start of the season. Then he was injured, I think, for the week 3. Week 4, he was partly back, but week 5 was his big, his big game really. So keep an eye on him. He could be a player to watch moving forward. That was pretty much it from notable scorers from the Panthers in week 5. So I'd say apart from the obvious suspects and the players that we've mentioned there, I don't really have anyone special that I would target apart from those in this game, because I think it's going to be quite a tight affair. I've got the Panthers edging it. I just have them at home, Cook possibly out or beaten up. Yeah, and I just don't. I think that's the worst thing that could have happened for the Vikings last week was the Panthers loss for me. And the way they lost, I think they'll come back spirited, and I think they might just pip us. Thoughts on that, Bren?
Yeah, a tough one to call. Like you say, if Cook's out, then I think I'm not sure why. Like you say, Darnold sort of put so much pressure on the passing game. Certainly is all right. I know, CMC, he's missing, but yeah, I think. I mean, you've still got two decent defenses there, as we've highlighted in previous weeks. So, but the old sort of wounded animal adage comes into play, and you think, the Panthers had a good start to the season or a decent start to the season. They won't want to see it slip away.
I think CMC might be back as well. He might be back.
Yeah, he's still. It's something that's yeah, could I think I mean I think CMC's back this weekend. Then I think
Just
Panthers
takes
at home.
Yeah, just take that limelight away from Darnold's performance, which was, you know, we were starting to really rely on Sam Darnold, and it wasn't the week that we expected from him. It's a bit of a knockdown, but anyway. So, who you on to next?
Okay, moving on to the Chargers at the Ravens. Chargers arguably coming off the back of possibly the most entertaining offensive game of week 5 against the Browns.
Absolute cracker.
47-42 was absolutely bonkers. So yeah, big home win to go 4-1, stay on top of the AFC West. Not one for the defensive purists, because it was all about Baker and Herbert's offense. And 41 points scored in the last quarter. It was just a bit batshit mental. That said, Derwin James, focusing on the Chargers initially, Derwin James had a big day. 34.5 points, 17 tackles, 1 for a loss, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble. He's a must start at the moment. 4 out of the 5 weeks so far this season, he's been over his projected numbers on in fantasy. Nasser Adderley is someone I think I've mentioned before in the secondary. Had a decent day, 15.5 points, and still floating around on the waivers. So again, coming into
He's awful though. He's fucking awful. But good at fantasy.
Well, again, he's one of those
people target him.
Yeah, it's one of these where you think, well, he's put up some half decent fantasy numbers, but would most sort of front offices sort of be falling over themselves to sign him up? Probably not. But that's the difference between the real world game and what we're talking about, I suppose, sometimes. Chargers side of it, Joey Bosa's been a bit disappointing so far for me this season. I know people are going to start him because it's Joey Bosa, but his numbers haven't quite been there. But then week 5 just showed that this was all about the Herbert fueled offense. And it's sort of. It could be a similar game against Ravens, to be honest. I'm not sure it's really one we want to be looking at in too much depth in terms of IDP. Moving over to the Ravens.
Definitely all about the offense, isn't it? Amazing.
Yeah, I think so. Moving on to another daft game from week 5. The Ravens beating the Colts in overtime, 31-25, but they had to rely on that man, Lamar Jackson. I think Mark Andrews as well. I mean, all the talk on Monday was about Jackson, but he was everywhere he needed to be to get him back into that game, and Jackson found him consistently. So they had dragged them back from a 25-9 deficit. Just pipped it in overtime. I'm a bit worried about this Ravens defense, actually. I mean, to be giving up 25 points, against this Colts team at home as well. And as we said, for my money, this Colts team is just bang average. Okay, if you're going to look at sort of IDP, yes, okay, you're going to be starting Patrick Queen. You'll play him. But since he racked up 22 points in week 1 against the Raiders. Since then, he's had a couple of okay weeks. But again, I've got to be fair to the guy. He's only 22. So from a dynasty perspective, if you're looking at someone long term, then the other 22-year-olds who's worth looking at, and he's already had at least 1 or 2 big plays this season, is Jason Owe, who's probably the pick of the week from some mediocre defensive performances elsewhere from Baltimore, 14.5 points, including the sack. As I say, I'm still a bit twitchy about this Ravens defense going up against, going into week 6. I know they're 4-1 and at home, but they let this Chargers team out in front like they did against the Colts, and they won't be reeling them in anywhere near as easily, if at all. Also, something to worry about, Eckler seems to be running, but they're not just relying on, Herbert. Eckler's, he's pounding the ground well at the moment, and Herbert just can't miss when they have to go to the air. He's just been laser accurate in most of the games in the last few weeks. So from an IDP perspective, I'm looking forward to the game, but I think it's another offensive shootout. So I think a bit like the game you've just touched on, I think you start your tried and tested. I mean, there is an argument for sort of Calais Campbell, who made some crucial plays. I was just watching the highlights of the Ravens game. That tackle for a loss, and then he stepped up and blocked the blocked the kick as well. So, but again, he's had a couple of good weeks, but the guy's 35. You're not going to be looking for him as any sort of long-term IDP solution. But fair play to him. He had a good game. But I'm taking the Chargers in this one. I think they're just really starting to roll now.
I've got the Chargers, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, like you said. I wouldn't be surprised if there's another massive shootout. I mean, I think the Chargers defense seems to be really bang average when it comes to actually stopping teams scoring on them. And the Ravens, seems to be pretty similar, really.
I've tried to put a positive spin on it.
I know, yeah.
There's a few bits and pieces there, but it's nothing to get terribly excited about.
For the guys going for the offensive players, it's going to be good fun, I think, on that game, reviewing that one. But defensively wise, like you said, probably one maybe to sort of semi-swerve, really. Apart from, like you said, big names. Now one not to swerve. I've got Rams at the Giants. Ching ching, IDP fans. Ching ching. Right. So the Giants had an injury nightmare riddled game against the Cowboys in Week 5. However, the tip and pick play by Lorenzo Carter was probably the highlight. Defensively, the Giants, they worked hard I didn't think with any real reward, as they seemed to spend the majority of the game on the field, the defense. They did score some decent IDP plus points, and there are a few players that I recommend having a look at picking up. Reggie Ragland scored well, 7 tackles, tackle for a loss, pass defended, and a fumble recovery. He's for me is worth an ad. And also Ty Crowder, who's starting to put up some real consistent numbers. And you need to take a look at this, what he's doing with Blake Martinez out. He's had over 8 or over tackles in the past 3 weeks. So he's somebody, I'm going to be saying to pick up. Going on to DLs, top Giants DL scorers in Week 5. Austin Johnson, 19.5 points. That included a sack. And as I mentioned, Lorenzo Carter. It was quite a low scoring week DB wise, really, with looking at it, only Logan Ryan really worth a note. 11 points he got, so nothing really to write home about. But like I mentioned, those linebackers and a couple of DLs of note there. Flipping over to the Rams. The Rams, they're still looking decent. 4-1 now. They're in the hunt for me. I fancy them against this banged up Giants side as well. They done just enough to win in Seattle. It sounds like Stafford's finger's going to be okay. And it was nice to see Bobby Trees getting some targets. That's just a little thing there, offensive wise. Don't know why I checked that in. The defensive performance against the Seahawks, it was quite mixed. But the matchup against the Giants, that's when you should be drilling at. And I'm sure they are. It's some chance for some big points against Danny Dimes, and they're going to be missing Barkley as well, so he hasn't got anybody to sort of maybe take that sort of pressure off when things aren't going too well. And it's no doubt he's going to have to air it out for what I would say would probably be large periods of the game if the Rams get in front. So for me, the Rams pass rush are definitely in this game, and the secondary, I'd double stack them if you can. Aaron Donald is an absolute huge play this week. He's got to be on that. This is the one game where it's one of those games that you're going to circle. But obviously, you're not going to be able to pick up Aaron Donald. We all know that. But you might be able to pick up Leonard Floyd. Now, Floyd, I don't know. You shouldn't be able to because he scored well in the last few weeks, so he should have already been snapped up. But if he isn't, pick him up because this is potentially a day. Talking about days, Sebastian Joseph Day. Look at that. I mentioned him last
I
week.
think you wrote that.
I know, unbelievable. I didn't actually. I just put that in. But yeah, Sebastian Joseph Day, mentioned him last week. So he may already be gone. I know other podcasts also mentioned him. And people have been talking him up before the game last week. But this is an even bigger game for him. So yeah, Sebastian Joseph Day, Leonard Floyd, obviously Aaron Donald. If you've got him, yeah. If you got him, you don't start him. There's something wrong with what you're doing. So yeah, the big points in week 5, they did come from Donald, 28.5 points from him, and DB Nick Scott, who got that pick towards it. But not really picking out those players because I don't really think they're going to be relative for this game. Obviously, Jalen Ramsey, he's going to be involved, I would think. I like Taylor Rapp in this game. He's somebody I would be looking for these wild sort of like Daniel Jones off balance throws through the middle. Taylor Rapp might be looking in the hunt, but also his tackle count's pretty good. So yeah, but all for me, all of the Rams D are good to go in week 6. I'm all in on the Rams going 5-1, and I see some big scores. So yeah, that is definitely not a game to swerve. It's not a game to swerve on the other side of things as well. Like I said, the Giants D, I expect them to still score quite consistently, but it'll be big plays for the Rams. That's what I'm hoping for. So what do you reckon on that, Bren?
Yeah, completely echo that. This Giants team they've been unlucky. I mean, we've got to be honest. I mean, they've had to suffer a lot of injuries to crucial players on both sides of the ball. You know, Martinez, Saquon being out again. They've had, wide receivers in and out of the roster. There's been no consistency for Jones, and God knows that was what he needed coming into the season.
Yeah, and
if he was going to perform.
I'm not saying that. The thing is he actually played quite well. It's just from an IDP perspective, he is always a dream sort of matchup because of the way Danny Dimes plays.
Yeah.
You know, he will take those risks and he will hold on to the ball for long periods, or run himself with his head into the,
into the turf. But
poor fella.
Yeah, but again, like you say, from the Rams' perspective, dream matchup, because the more weapons you take away from Daniel Jones, the more he's got to air it out and take risks, and okay, he takes it down and runs with it, and he's prone to turn it over and fumbling it. So
Jabril Cox absolutely smashed him. Did you see him? God, poor fella.
So, I completely agree, and the Rams all day long to win that one. So, I think that's like you say, a bit of value on the Giants side of it. But right, do I have to do this next one? Texans at the Colts.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want. Well, they both had interesting weeks. So let's start with the Texans, the away team. They lost the Week 5 matchup at home to the Pats, but it was close, 22-25, and they played well. To be fair, I mean, I was sitting there watching it, cheering on Mills because it's against the Patriots, and for 3 quarters I think they were in the game, and ultimately they lost out to give the Patriots their dues, which I don't like doing, but you have to sometimes. Good game management, clock management in the 4th quarter to sort of tough out the result. From an IDP perspective, from the Texans, Terrence Mitchell in the secondary had another decent week, 16 points, including an important forced fumble. I found him floating around on a couple of waivers. And he's had 2 decent fantasy weeks on the bounce for me. So against his Colts team, if you are looking a bit short in the secondary, he is out there. So actually is Lonnie Johnson. Didn't put up huge numbers, 13.5. Had another pick following on from the one he had against the Bills. So he seems to be sort of trending up a little bit since week 4. And then Christian Kirksey at linebacker, who I think we've mentioned before, picked up another 18 points. Also floating around there on the waivers, and I think he's continuing to have a good season. So there is some fantasy value on this, Texan side of things. I think the DBs, could be in play. My concern really is can they contain Jonathan Taylor, who after a slowish start seems to be, finding a bit of rhythm. He did a fair bit of damage against us in Miami the other week. So whether the DL can sort of contain him, but then I can see you smiling over there. Everyone runs the ball through Miami. So moving on to the Colts. Well, we've already touched on that game. An overtime loss at Baltimore. So again, another team that saw a winning margin snatched away from them, as we've said, thanks in part to, or largely to Jackson and Mark Andrews at tight end. So like Houston, though, they were in the game. They played well for the first 3 quarters. I don't know what happened this last week. Everything happened in the fourth quarter. So Darius Leonard, linebacker, is still an obvious starter for me out of this Colts defense. Racked up another 17.5 points. And I think he'll be up for this. This is a crucial divisional matchup. And I think the Colts will be a bit pig sick after not seeing that game out against the Ravens. Kenny Moore, someone we've mentioned once or twice in the first few weeks of the season at corner, picked up another 14 points. And Barr, he had a fairly quiet week against the Dolphins, but bar that, he's been, putting up some decent fantasy numbers. Another waiver watch, I think someone we've mentioned in passing before, Bobby Okereke at linebacker. He's at double fantasy points, double figures in the last 3 weeks. So has Mohammed in the DL. He picked up another 18 points. So there are players, again, coming into sort of bye weeks where you might be looking at sort of bringing someone in, even if it's just for a week, just to fill a gap. 2 teams that are not really looking, they're not going to achieve anything this season, but I think maybe because of that, some of these defensive players have been overlooked. There are some players there that are picking up, some decent fantasy numbers. I'd like to see a bit more from DeForest Buckner. For me, on the Colts side of it, he's had a quiet 3 weeks after initially having a good start. But again, this could be an ideal game for him.
Yeah.
So he is a good player, and I think if you've got him, this is the sort of matchup where I think you'd sort of be looking at him doing better. I've got a Colts home win for this. I think they'll lean on Taylor, as they've started to do in the last couple of weeks. If they can establish the ground game, then they're not as reliant on Carson, which is where they've kind of unraveled a bit, I think, in early weeks of the season. So they seem to be trying to get that ground game established. Hines backing him up. I think the Texans might struggle to contain that sort of dual threat. I think most of the threat obviously comes from Jonathan Taylor. But I think defensively the Colts have more to offer. I've highlighted a few Texans players, but I think when you drill down into it, the Colts I think they've got a couple more quality players on the defensive side of the ball as well. And again, the Texans are playing with, one of your favourite subjects, a rookie QB. Although he looked good last week. So
I mean, that's the problem is the Texans at the moment. I mean, they should be the easy bet. I mean, we walked into the Hippodrome halfway through, and the bloody Texans were winning. And it was, and again, they constantly surprise. Put it that way. That's what they've been. They've surprised that they haven't just they haven't gone away quietly. Every week they just don't. They do eventually, but it seems the teams have to work a bit harder, and I think that'll be the same for the Colts this week. I haven't seen anybody really fully blow them out yet. But yeah, I have got the Colts. Just again, you'd struggle not to. So that takes me on to the Chiefs at Washington. Oh, the Chiefs. It's a shocking performance by their secondary for me in week 5. Which obviously Josh Allen just fully took advantage of it. They so many times people were open, to the point it did just get a little bit silly towards the end for me. What does it mean, I suppose, as the Chiefs moving forward is the kind of question that we probably everyone's asking themselves, offensively and defensively. I expect there will be some kind of bounce back. Just I'm not sure whether this is the game for them. It's a terrible game for them after that. They could have done with a game against the Texans or being back at home, but going to Washington will be possibly rubbing their hands together on this. I do expect the Chiefs to win it, but I think it'll be quite a tough game. Washington in week 5, they couldn't really get it together. Unfortunately, they just suffered in the secondary. They gave up just those big plays. Too many at the wrong time, unfortunately for them. They looked like every time they looked like they were going to get in front and then get away and actually dominate the game, they give away another huge play. The Callaway catch in the end zone, and a couple of them, and a couple of times Kamara just ran in with nobody seemed to be anywhere near him really. So it wasn't a particularly great game defensively for Washington, and that you could see that from the points wise as well. It was they didn't have a DB in the top 50 points wise. Nobody. Cameron Curl scored with a mediocre 10.5 points, which sounds all right, but it actually it isn't at all. At linebacker though, they've got their star performer in Cole Holcomb. He had a good game again. 17.5 points he put up, and up front they done okay points wise. They did get a fair bit of pressure on Winston. It just didn't, like it doesn't often with Winston. The guy throws falling sometimes, and that's what kind of happens. And he tends to make those throws, unfortunately for them. Chase Young scored well, but it was DL Deron Payne who he got the sack, fumble recovery, and a tackle for a loss, and he was the top man of the week for Washington. I quite like this matchup though for Washington, and I feel they'll get pressure on Pat Mahomes. I do. It could be a great time, like I said, to play Kansas City, and they might do some strange things. They've just put Hilaire's just gone on to IR, so it's not all plain sailing for them at the moment. It's far from it. So there may be a pick or two, there may be a sack or two, because Mahomes might do things that he might not be as in control as we usually see. Yeah. But there isn't anybody. So from the Chiefs side of things, there isn't anybody that really stands out that isn't a well-known name. From the Chiefs side of things, it's a little bit of a mess from what they're doing and who's the consistent player. Apart from Nick Bolton, who we've talked about a few times on this podcast. Nick Bolton, he top scored with 17 points in week 5, and he was very much the best of a bad bunch. I worry on his snap share though, because Willie Gay Jr. is coming back, and he's back from IR. So I would proceed with caution. If you've got to pick anybody up, you'd got to pick anybody up from the from Kansas defense, I wouldn't bother at this moment in time. It's a little bit all over the place. Jarius Sneed is the lead sort of consistent DB, the consistent scorer out of them. So he's possibly the one that I would look at playing. Like I said, obviously Nick Bolton, but yeah, just be aware that his snap share could change. I'm not high at all on the Chiefs defense. I'm picking the Chiefs to win the game. I quite like the Washington D in this, but it's going to be the big names, the guys that we all know and love, in the mix. So yeah, I'm going Chiefs, but it's going to be a tight one.
Yeah, it's a bit odd looking at the Chiefs sort of, sitting there bottom of the division at the moment. And I know there's a lot of talk. I mean, we've already touched on Herbert and the Chargers, and there are a few of the pundits saying I could see him possibly topping this division. And back in the summer, you're thinking, no, they've got a quality QB there, but yeah, the Chiefs at the moment, I don't know what's wrong. Like you said, that we're not high on the defense at all, which is primarily what we're here to talk about. But that
I mean,
offense doesn't really seem
yeah.
to be clicking. Like you said,
Sanders took a couple of those bloody catches, virtually sat down in the end zone.
Mm,
Knox strolled in a couple of times, nobody anywhere near him, and it was just like, I just feel that I don't know what's going on. I don't quite know what's going on. It's all like they're going too mad, trying to pick off Josh Allen. Like you had DBs running out of position, I think, to try and make big plays where it just doesn't feel like there's anybody. It's like they haven't got a captain, a defensive captain on that field running the ship and saying to him, "Oi, what are you doing? You're out of position. You're a couple of yards off." But yeah, they've ripped him apart. I felt that the Bills, going to Arrowhead and doing that. They
well,
looked.
I mean, we said last week that if this would be, a real statement of intent off the back of, some other important wins, and if they could go to Arrowhead and do that, then they were the real deal and had to be considered, one of the favourites to go all the way this season. I agree with what you say about the Washington D. It's a good matchup. We've been saying that for the early weeks of the season that we had expected a bit more from them. Certainly the big name players, like the young and sweaty combination. We haven't quite seen. Yes, okay. As you said, Chase Young had a better. Holcomb's been consistent. We seem to mention him every week. I suppose the only question is, despite how mediocre the Chiefs' defense have been in recent weeks, has that Washington offense got enough to really, they're not going to do the damage, anything like, what we saw from Josh Allen and the Bills. Chiefs to bounce back purely because, well, two reasons. They've got to. Otherwise, really, the division's going to get away from them. And I don't think the Washington offense will have enough to. I think they'll cause some problems on defense, and you've covered that off nicely. But I don't think the defense aren't that bad. They're not what we were expecting and chasing from the runners up of last year. But I don't think Washington will have enough going forward. Okay, moving on to one of your favourite matchups. I'm sure you'll be recording this while we're down in London. Proper old school NFC North matchup, this one. Packers at the Bears. So, both coming off good road wins. 1 and 2 in the NFC North.
I think Packers game's still going on, isn't it? It's still just kicking.
Crosby will get one in a minute. Yeah, so Packers in week 5, won at the Bengals, but they needed overtime to do it. And yes, that was no thanks in large part to Mason Crosby fluffing his lines on 3 field goals. I think this week the Packers DLs they'll have to sort of work hard to stop the Bears pounding the ball. They got the ground game working well against the Raiders, and that was without Montgomery as well. So they seem to have, established a bit of a theme with the run as well. So for the Packers, you'd be looking at the likes of sort of Kenny Clark being in play. He had a decent sort of 15.5 points last week. Preston Smith, who I found out on the waiver wires, picked up 14.5 points. Another player we've mentioned on and off, linebacker Chris Barnes, also out there on the waivers, 17.5 points. And then assuming they can and I think they probably have got the defense to do it. If they can slow that Bears running game down, you potentially be looking at someone I've had in and out of a couple of my teams in the last couple of seasons, but I've always found a bit inconsistent, a bit frustrating. That's Adrian Amos, but he did pick up 20 points last week, including a pick. He, he he is prone to having good games, and I think this might be one where he is in play. So he'd be worth a look. I guess the other question is whether we see. I don't know whether we'll see Jalen Smith this week. He's marked down as sort of, or he was marked down on sleeper as out, not injured, but I believe the Packers are saying that he's just, taking time to get to grips with the playbook and settle in. So whether we see him this week against the Bears, I don't know. The Bears arguably had an even better road win for my money against the Raiders team. We haven't said anything about the Raiders yet, have we? But
Nope.
that's maybe for one of the other guys to cover off on another pod. But yeah, Raiders, an away win for them, kept them to single figures. I did mention the other week that the problem with this Bears defense is that whilst it's a good defensive unit, from a fantasy perspective, it's still, for me, basically, it's a two-man team. It's the same names that we're mentioning seemingly every week, and it's Khalil Mack and Roquan Smith. So Khalil Mack went over 20 points again, 21.5 points, including a sack. Roquan Smith, by recent standards, had an awful game, just the 15.5 points. But I was going back over the first 5 weeks. Now, these two alone have racked up close to 200 fantasy points in the first 5 weeks. 176 points they've picked up. And there's no one else on this Bears team. Although, again, it's one of those, it's a good team defense. I think they're well drilled. They're well organized. I like the way they don't do anything outside of Mack and Smith, anything spectacular, but they controlled that game for the most part against the Raiders. But the problem is, you start looking at the fantasy, the IDP numbers, and no one's consistently putting up double figures. Really, it's difficult to find any value outside of those two obvious players. I think summing the game up as a whole, the Packers, for me, off the back of that Bengals win, win the game. Primarily because watching Rodgers and Adams, yes, I know they needed time to do it, and the kicker had a mare, but Adams and Rodgers really seem to be in sync, and if they're clicking, then I can see it being a tough day for that Bears defense. So they seem to have gotten over that sort of the early sort of glitches they had. So, but
yeah, I'm gonna have my punt on this one, and I'm gonna go Bears. I know what you said about Adams and Rodgers, and yeah, that's probably the big problem for me. But I just got a feeling. I just got a feeling that the Packers they couldn't really finish the game or get hold of the game, and that kind of concerned me. Why they didn't? I know Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase done some amazing stuff, and you look at that and go, but still, for me, they should have been able to manage that game and finish that game. And because they didn't, and like you said, the Bears win was quite surprising. So yeah, I'm just on a little cheeky Bears, going for the cheeky Bears. There we go.
I'll 10 on it.
Yeah, there you go. Right, where am I? Cardinals at Browns. Wow.
Have you finished apologising to all those Arizona fans yet, or are you still working?
Yes, yeah. Okay, I've switched. Look, at the end of the day,
he's on board now.
I've got no problem if they're doing this. They are at the moment brilliant. So there we go. That's not a problem. It's when they're not brilliant and they keep telling me they're brilliant. You're like, I can't deal with it. Anyway, right. There's my rant. Right. Okay. The Browns. So the Browns, they gave up and scored a lot of points in the shootout against the Chargers. So it was far from a defensive masterclass. A lot of blown coverage and missed tackles. So yeah, we're not going to say go on. You want to look at how to defend. Let's go and have a look at that. It wouldn't be there. But there were decent IDP plus points scorers. Greedy Williams, he's had 2 great weeks back to back with some decent tackle numbers as well from him. So yeah, you just got to keep an eye on injury news on him, because he picks up a shoulder issue, and we're waiting to see what that means, and if he's going to miss any time. But he's somebody that I like, and he's looking decent. Mars Garrett is continuing his dominance. He had another good week, posting 18 points. Malik McDowell, he got to Justin Herbert, so he managed a good week, but he's not really consistent, so wouldn't just call that a one-off for now. Troy Hill, he scored over 10 points for a second week in a row. Secondary side of things, it's not a favourable match though against the Cardinals. As I mentioned, they are flying. Literally, at this moment in time, it is really good from the Cardinals at both sides of the ball. The way their game management is being put together, and they're making big plays at key times. And I'll talk about that straight away. So let's go on to the Cardinals. Butter Baker, he picked off Trey Lance really early on, and that really catapulted that performance straight away. It got everybody, it got the crowd up, it got the team up. It was a big play, and that's what makes him one of the best players, one of the best safeties there is. Yeah, but it was kind of an ugly game. It was quite an interesting game against San Francisco, and this is why I'm suddenly like I'm saying, I'm really quite behind the Cardinals at this moment in time, because they went and played dirty. They played it, they're not the pretty stuff. There was some difficult catches by D Hop, some difficult throws by Kyler, and there was, James Conner is pounding the ball. The way they move the ball is quite regimental, and yeah, it's good. It's good stuff. Defensively, points wise in IDP plus, Zach Allen, he had his best week of the season, sacking rookie Trey Lance, and JJ Watt. He caused havoc all game, and he was right in Lance's face. He posted his best numbers of the season, so Cardinals fans have been sort of like waiting for that performance, and he definitely had it in week 5. 18.5 points it was, but a Baker 17.5 points. Obviously that pick, which was a big play. Isaiah Simmons. Also, he actually scored okay. He did leave the field for concussion check at one point, and that's why I think it did dent his points slightly. But yeah, this week I fancy the Cards to get to Baker. I do. I think that there'll be a point in the game where there might be a big play coming, and it could be a sack, forced fumble, turnover. I just fancy it. This matchup, this is definitely my game of the week. This is the one I'm really looking forward to, because the Browns could do something, because they're still a decent outfit. I got the Cards winning it though. Yeah, and I would look at their big defensive players again to come and step up. So again, these aren't waiver wire players. Obviously, you're not going to find some of those big names, but they're definitely in for a big week, I think. What do you reckon, Bram?
Yeah, on the face of it, you'd have to go with the Cards. You can't argue with a 5-0 record. But the win over the Niners, rookie quarterback, it was probably expected. The Browns, for me, it's a bit like the Packers-Bears game we've just touched on. If I was going to take a punt on someone who possibly wasn't necessarily the bookie's favourite going into the game, the Browns might be it this week. I think their problem and the frustration for their fans is, I mean, you saw an offensive sort of shootout last week. In weeks past, you've seen the defense sort of, because we had that 2-week period where Baker just seemed to be a bit all over the shop, but Myles Garrett and co seem to step up and sort of bail them out. If they can put that together on both sides of the ball, and I think that's been the problem. If they can do that, everyone knows how good they are potentially. Um, the head would say, yeah, I'd go with the Cards, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Browns did hand them their first defeat of the season. I think it's an interesting matchup. Like I say, probably the game of the weekend, and I don't see the Cards going undefeated for too much longer. I think someone will step up and sort of put a stop to it. I think the Browns have got the tools to do it. Whether Baker can, keep his head and whether the defense can put together another performance like they did in what was it, week 3 or 4, then when Myles Garrett racked up about 55 points, then yeah. So I got a sneaky leaning towards the Browns. So
go on then.
but that'll be
You
wrong.
go Browns. Go on. What you want? Cowboys at
Difference.
Patriots.
Cowboys at the Pats. So another team I'm keen on at the moment. Not the Patriots, obviously. So Cowboys week 5. That'd be a shock to everyone. Cowboys week 5 win over the Giants. Well, we've already touched on the Giants. Banged up, unfortunate, a lot of injuries, but the Cowboys offense doesn't care about things like that. It just carries on rolling over teams at the moment. So yeah, fairly comfortable win. They're out there in front in the NFC East, 4-1. The NFC East is a little more competitive than what we saw last year. But again, we've got to focus on that man, Trevon Diggs, number 1 corner for me at the moment. Number 1 corner for everyone, I think, if you look at the stats.
Love him.
In the league right now, another 18.5 points, another pick last Sunday. This LB core, Micah Parsons and Van Der Esch, chipped in with some decent performances. Parsons pick of the bunch with 14 points. I just wonder whether the Jalen Smith, I mean, he didn't really seem to sort of be fitting into that sort of LB rotation that was going on. So I just wonder with him out the door now, whether it'll all settle down a bit and we'll start to see a bit more sort of consistency there. Not that he was really featuring, getting a whole load of snaps anyway. On the waiver watch, I mean, the last game you just covered off, it's all about sort of the big name players and you've got to sort of play safe. One that surprised me actually, and going back to we've touched on how good Diggs has been at corner, Anthony Brown.
Yeah.
Now he's currently on sleeper down as number 3 corner, and he is out there on the waiver wires. He's picked up another 18 points last week, including a pick and a TD as well, an IDP TD. But I was going back through the numbers. This guy's been consistent. Week 4, Panthers 18 points. Week 3, Philly 15 points. Week 2 against the Rams, or it's the Rams 10.5 points. First week against the Bucks 14 points. He's scoring well. And he's in double figures every week, and he is out there on the waivers. So if you're looking for a bit of hidden value, then he's Brown's got to be worth a look, surely. Patriots week 5, as we've said, sort of grounded out in the 4th quarter against Texans. Given their due, they toughed out a road win. As I've said before, good game management in that 4th quarter. They're not a fun team to watch at the moment, if I'm being honest. It's a bit functional, but then Belichick's got no problem with winning ugly. Defensive highlights, again, someone we seem to mention every week, Matt Judon, 29 points.
Monster game.
Another 2 sacks, 3 hits on the QB on top of that. A fumble recovery to boot. If you got him, you start him. It's just, he's nailed on. It's 3 weeks in a row that guy's gone over 20 points in IDP, and he's the shining light in a defense which, whilst it's an improvement on last season, I think even the Patriots fans would admit the defense was a bit of a car crash last season. We expected them to be better. I expected them to be better than they have been, honestly. So I think outside of Judon, Carl Duggar played okay, 12.5 points. He's out there on the waivers, but against his Cowboys offense, no.
We did. I think sure we called it last week. We called that Judon
Mm.
Duggar stack, and you know what? That would have
Yeah, I
whacked him
mean,
some points.
if you started them both, because they were playing the Texans, we didn't expect the Texans to be maybe as good
Yeah.
as they were. But this week,
Nah.
Cowboys all day. I mean, this offense is just, like I said, it's just rolling at the moment. They've got a solid linebacker core there, which I think is settled now, or fairly settled. And they've currently got the best corner in the league.
Yeah.
So from front to back, I don't see anything other than a
Yep.
Cowboys win and them sort of jumping up to 5-1. So
Same here, mate. I've got
yeah,
Cowboys as well. So
it's a nice easy one, that one.
that was yeah. Raiders at Broncos. So it was a tight game for the Raiders against the Bears, and obviously it didn't turn out the way they wanted it. Carr didn't really get going for me in the game. He got sacked by Khalil Mack early doors, and then he got picked off in important moments of the game. Points wise, not particularly great with and what with the news, obviously with Gruden is gone, so now it's probably not the best way for them to go into this game against the Broncos. However, week 5 was good for Yannick Ngakwe. He registered 2 sacks. He scored 20.5 points in IDP plus, but that was pretty much it. When you go through all the point side of things, there really wasn't much else from the Raiders. Yeah, it was a tough game for him, especially against that. It was still a run heavy Bears defense, and yeah, they really struggled to stop it. The Broncos also had a tough time of it all. They come up against Big Ben, which his arm suddenly started working. It's working again, and it's working quite well. It's amazing. I think Chase Claypool, he's back fit. He must have said to him, "You sort that arm out," and he did. He sorted the arm out. Chase Claypool was pretty much unplayable at times. And points wise, yeah, they sort of struggled in the secondary. I think Simmons done all right, but apart from that, it wasn't great. The top points was probably Malik Reed and AJ Johnson, linebacker. They put the tackle numbers together. They're both players of interest to me, but not particularly in this matchup. It's not a particular game that I would look at. Because it's extremely hard to predict what's going to happen in this one. You've got a Raiders team that was looking all right and now looks maybe broken. Denver team, that wasn't a great performance. A lot of people moaning about Teddy now. So yeah, it's a tough one to call, and I'd tell you what, I wouldn't be rushing to the bookies to put some money on this one. Yeah. So it does worry me though, trying to predict it from a defensive side of things. So I'm not really gonna. Yeah, I'm not gonna dwell on it actually. Yeah, I think for me the Broncos will win it, but I don't think it'd be particularly pretty. So yeah, that's it. Not doing any more
Yeah,
on it already. I
no,
just
no.
flicked through it and I just looked back through while I was going through that. Then I just went back through the stats, and then I thought, yeah, I wonder why I didn't write much.
No, I think you're spot on. I think that was a very below par Broncos we saw, and the whole Gruden thing that's broken in the last,
Yeah.
the team, it's got to have an effect on them.
Yeah, I mean, it
So
might. These kind of things. I mean, you might find that game goes off. It could go off, and in a funny way, it wouldn't be the biggest shock. However, you can't predict it. You
no,
can't because there's nothing to say it will or it won't. And
no.
it's
I mean,
just the players.
it could be 9-3. It could be,
But both teams consistently across their players as well. Then they're a little bit up and down when you look at. They haven't got some front runners. They haven't got. You couldn't say that week in week out. you should be starting their secondary because they're racking it. They're making quarterbacks throw on them. Neither team are doing it.
Mm,
So for me, well, the Bears just ran all over the Raiders, and
yeah.
yeah, and Big Ben, he did. Yeah, they did. The Steelers did well. I thought they were good, and there you go. So
Yeah.
let's move on.
Okay. Moving on to the late Sunday game. Well, we've just talked about Big Ben, so we've got the Seahawks going to the Steelers. Um, Seahawks week 5 lost to the Rams. They're a frustrating team, Seattle.
Russ has a poorly finger.
Yeah, Mr. Unlimited, my ass. So yeah, they've dropped to 2-3 in that loss to the Rams after what was, and we highlighted it a couple of weeks ago. They needed that week 4 win at the Niners. They got it. You wait to see if they can kick on. But after that, you've got the Cards going 5-0. The Rams are at 4-1, and the Seahawks just really aren't in the hunt in this division at the moment. Jordan Brooks, the linebacker, had another good game. Trying to sort of focus on the positives defensively. He picked up 17.5 points against the defeat to the Rams. Quandre Diggs at DB had a decent game, 16.5. Again, another player is floating around on waivers if you're a little bit short. There might be a little bit of value, I suppose, in that Seattle DB, although we've not been too enamored with it. But it seems Big Ben seems to have remembered how to throw the ball, but he's throwing it well at the moment. So I don't think he's going to be prone to too many mistakes. Seattle's front are also going to have to be mindful of the fact that Najee Harris finally sort of stepped up and ran for over 100 yards, including a touchdown. So yeah, the Steelers looking a bit more potent against the Broncos, who weren't great, as we've said. I'd like to see some better numbers from the usual suspects, Bobby Wagner's and Jamal Adams, and I think they will be better. That was a tough game against the Rams, as it always is. We've already said the Rams are going to be contenders this season. Going to the Steelers, well, you already touched on it. They seem to have had a 3-week holiday, and now they've sort of woken up and remembered how to play football again. After that week 1, they seem to be basking in the glory of that week 1 win over the Bills, and just took 3 weeks off. Defense, did a solid job shutting down the Broncos until it was a bit too late for Teddy to try and sort of force a comeback. Picked up a couple of sacks, crucial pick in the fourth and goal. So they made big plays at big times. That 4th and goal stop was in the last 10 minutes, and that was the game done then. Obviously, they are benefiting from having sort of TJ Watt back. He had a quiet day of it on Sunday, but I think just having him back in the lineup is, he's crucial. It's a big factor for me. Minka Fitzpatrick had a season high in fantasy so far, 16.5 points. Devin Bush racked up another sack, got to the QB a couple of times. What Cam Hayward, Schobert, the usual suspects all racked in with 10 points plus. So it was a good, team defensive performance. But and again, those are the obvious players that you're going to play. In terms of waiver pickups, the Steelers, no, slim pickings. I mean, all the key players are going to be taken. Maybe there's an argument for a Terrell Edmonds or something if you're after a bit of DB cover on a bye week. He's had a couple of 15 points sort of weekends. The problem is trying to call the game. You're just not entirely. Will the Steelers sort of go again? This is a matchup. We go, which version of Seattle and Pittsburgh are we going to get this week?
Terrible consistency.
So again, you've got 2 and 3 teams who, when they're good, you look at the Seattle, Seahawks going to the Niners. Pittsburgh looked good last week, but in the mix of all that, you've seen some very, a real mixed bag. But I'll take the Steelers this week off the back of that Broncos performance. I think that's the only way I can rationalise it, really.
I'm going Steelers, especially on the Russ injury as well. I think that that really tips it for me. Yeah, at Steelers as well. I just don't see the Seahawks. They're really banged up. I mean, I don't know if Carson's fit and all that kind of stuff as well. It's just not looking particularly great for him. Okay, over to me to finish off on the Monday Night Football. Wow. What an absolute week 5 was an absolute banger for both of these teams. The Bills at the Titans. I mean, I think the Titans had 1 and 3 in the top scorers. Kevin Byard and Harold Landry in points scored. They were 1 and 3, number 1 and 3. So this is about this stacking. You get it right, you win that. People who if you stack those two, you've won your week. That's pretty much it. Yeah, absolute banger of a week. However, so what happened in that Titans Jags game? So the recovered fumble and touchdown by Kevin Byard, that set the wheels in motion really for the whole game. But their secondary did give up some real soft plays against the Jags, and that kept the Jags in it. However, the soft Jags defense, they couldn't contain Derrick Henry, and that was pretty much the game done. Byard picked off T-Law again in garbage time. It finished an absolute great day for him. He finished with 35 points in IDP plus, and he topped the week scoring, as I said. And Harold Landry, he was our pick from last week. He got 2 more sacks under his belt. Yeah, you could kind of see it coming, and it did happen. We kind of tipped it, and it happened. So celebrations all round. So yeah, going over to the Bills. The Bills, like we said earlier when we talked about the Chiefs, they done it. They done it in week 5. They beat the Chiefs, and Josh Allen found his targets wide open against that shite secondary performance from the Chiefs. The Bills have now they've put that sort of bit to bed now. Whether they can beat a big side, it seems to happen to them every year. They get that question asked of them. I don't know why they always seem to get a bit of an easy run of games. Everybody's jumped on that bandwagon, and then they do beat one of those teams, and they've done that now, so they can just crack on with doing what they're doing. They have a matchup this week against the Titans. This is the one for me, and I'm going for Bills players. Greg Rousseau, he top scored points wise for the Bills. He got 26 points. I'm really excited by him. I think he looks a real decent player, and he causes absolute havoc. He's a little bit boom or bust at the moment, but like I said, I love this gamble. You go with him up against Tannehill. Could be some sacks on the game for him. Obviously, secondary wise, with the Bills, we know they've got some big players. They are carrying some injuries with Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer. But the guy that nobody's really talking about is a guy called Taron Johnson. He scored 19 points at the weekend. He signed a big contract last week, and he played absolutely lights out against the Chiefs. His tackle, I can't remember any tackles he had, but he had an absolute shed load. I think it was 12. So that was his tackle floor. He's such a guy I'm high on. I think Taron Johnson is somebody that people should be targeting. I worry about the Titans secondary against Josh Allen. He had no issues in finding Diggs, Sanders, and Knox. I know we mentioned that the secondary in the Chiefs was particularly poor, but I think there was elements of the game that the Titans secondary was poor against the Jags, and I felt that was part of the reason why. I know obviously James Robinson ran quite well as well, but definitely the secondary got opened up, and I do worry about this. Kevin Byard will be busy, so I expect him to score well again, but you're not going to find him on any waiver wires. Yeah, I think the big points are going to come from the Bills linebackers, the D line as well, because you've got the heavy run game coming from the Titans, and the most sacked QB in Ryan Tannehill. So yeah, so Greg Rousseau is he's my pick to start this one. He's the one I feel like the Bills D could be in for a good scoring day across the board. Where do you think? Where do you sit on this one, Bren?
Yeah, I think it's spot on again. I mean, it's even with one or two injuries in that Bills defense, the pass protection at Tennessee's pretty non-existent. I mean, like I said when we were talking about the Jags earlier, I mean, Tannehill bought it 3 times, and that's been a good week for the Titans of late. And you stack them up against this Bills front seven, and I don't like his chances at all.
McDermott with these weapons is from a defensive side of things is just he must be loving it. And I tell you what, the Titans, I'd be worried. I'd be worried. I do feel that the Bills are really going to get to Tannehill in this unless they sort that out pretty quick.
Yeah, I don't see any indication that's going to happen anytime soon. But load heavy on the Bills, and another win for Buffalo.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's it. We're pretty much done there.
That's week 6.
That's week 6. Yeah. So this week I'm going to do just quickly do my picks. Do them slightly differently to I picked 5 before, just random players. But I'm going to do it as a tackle floor player. Like I mentioned last week, trying to get that player who constantly scores tackles well consistently, just to give you that floor of points that you want. And then I'm going to pick one big player. So he's somebody that you can sort of take a punt on. And I expect him to go off. And then my top overall defensive point scorer of the week. That's what I'm going to do. So my picks for week 6, my tackle floor ad is, I mentioned him earlier, Giants linebacker Ty Crowder. Just feel that he's adding consistent numbers. And with Blake Martinez out, there is that opportunity to take it. So yeah, Ty Crowder is the Giants linebacker I'm going to take is my tackle floor ad. My big play ad is Greg Rousseau. As I mentioned earlier, great matchup. He had a great week this week. He's just fitting in. He seems to be getting getting better week in, week out. Up against Tannehill, there's some big points to be had. So he's the one I'm going for. My top tip for my top point scorer, it's got to be Aaron Donald this week. Against Danny, sorry Giants fans, but geez, just don't. Yeah, I'm scared for you. Right, that's that done. Jobs are good and right. I'm off to try and sort my insides out before London round 2 is upon us. Yeah, so thanks very much. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and remember, keep rushing.